Approaches to discipline. The violation of company rules can be handled in many different ways. The first approach to discipline came from Douglas MacGregor, the hot stove rule. This approach to discipline is discussed in terms of what happens when a person touches a hot stove. The consequences are A. A warning system. A good manager has, before any behavior has occurred, communicated what the consequences are for the undesirable behavior. An immediate burn. If discipline is required, it must occur immediately after the undesirable act is observed. The person must see the connection between the act and the discipline. C. Consistency. There are no favorites. Hot stoves burn everyone alike. Any employee who performs the same undesirable act will be disciplined similarly. D. Impersonal. Disciplinary action is directed against the act, not at the person. It is meant to eliminate undesirable behaviors. Next, progressive discipline. This is an approach in which a sequence of penalties is administered. Each one is slightly more severe than the previous one. The goal is to build a discipline program that progresses from less severe to more severe in terms of punishment. It is important in any disciplinary system to formally record what the policy is and when and what action was taken. Its purpose is to instill in the employee an opportunity for self-correction in order to avoid further infractions. Progressive discipline must include due process to satisfy that employee rights were not violated and defines the conditions for responsible use of discipline. This means that procedures were taken to ensure the employee was treated justly and fairly to deter outbreaks from the labor sector, especially unions.
Progressive discipline in the workplace is a process for dealing with employees' job performance in a systematic way. When performance problems arise, a policy of progressive discipline addresses those problems with increasing formality, often starting with a warning, meaningful coaching to help the employee correct the problem, and escalating discipline if the employee does not improve his or her performance. Ultimately, the disciplinary action may result in suspension and/or termination from employment. Because progressive discipline policies provide ample opportunity for an employee to correct performance problems and supplies the employer with substantial documentation of uncorrected performance problems, these processes may make it easier for an employer to defend against an unlawful termination lawsuit. For more information on progressive discipline, contact an attorney in your area today.
And then, positive or corrective discipline. The advocates of this approach view is as future-oriented, as working with employees to solve problems so that problems do not occur again. Employees' mistakes are used to help them learn how to change. The discussion focuses on the problem and how it can be solved rather than on who is to blame and why. Thus, it seeks to discourage further infractions and to encourage employees to comply with the existing rules and regulations. The objectives of disciplinary action are positive in nature.
Every organization has performance problems that need to be dealt with. This program from CRMLearning gives you the how-to and models the proper way to conduct these performance discussions. Positive discipline takes the fear out of doing performance coaching because it provides clear step-by-step directions on how to prepare for and conduct a performance discussion and then follow up on it. The program demonstrates 5 simple and easy-to-follow steps that will guide managers and supervisors through any performance discussion. The first step is to identify the problem using specific descriptions of desired performance versus actual performance.
It's 8:45. You were supposed to be here at 8:30. I think you've been running behind quite a bit lately, both in getting into work and getting back from lunch.
Really? Hadn't noticed.
Next, you analyze the severity of the problem by examining its impact, the consequences, and past practices for similar situations. Then determine what type of discussion is appropriate. The third step is discussing the problem with the employee. First, gain his or her agreement, and then identify specific solutions.
And if there is some kind of an emergency, you'll be available to immediately call home.
I think that could work.
The fourth step is documenting the nature of the problem, the history of the problem, and what was said in the discussion. And finally, the program teaches managers and supervisors to follow up, to recognize improvement, or take appropriate action if the problem has not been corrected. Positive discipline teaches managers and supervisors how to have problem-solving discussions that encourage employees to take personal responsibility for their behavior.
Then you agree that your tardiness and your absenteeism is a problem that needs to be fixed?
Yes, I do.
Apparently, the oil has been available all along in the back storeroom. So, do you agree to follow the procedures?
Yeah, of course I agree.
CRM Learning delivers 5 simple steps that can take your performance coaching from painful to positive.
So, will you do it?
Yes.
Yes, I will.
There's no reason I can't. Yes.
Next, negative approach. This approach emphasizes the punitive effects on undesirable behavior. The purpose is to punish employees for mistakes, and it is usually severe to remind others of the consequences of wrongdoing. Employees who are motivated by fear are not oriented toward becoming outstanding performers because they are motivated to avoid failure and to produce only the minimum amount of work to avoid punishment. Next is the preventive discipline. This is the action taken by the company to encourage employees to follow standards and rules so that infractions do not occur. Its basic objective is to encourage employees' self-discipline through the self-actualization of its employees' needs and wants, in line with the existing company rules and regulations. It is more proactive in nature since it helps employees avoid infractions in the first place by letting them know firsthand what the rules and regulations are. And last, counseling approach. The erring employee is counseled rather than progressively penalized for the first few breaches of rules and regulations. This approach believes that employees can be constructively corrected without penalty. First, violators are given a private discussion. Second, entails a corrective approach. And lastly, a third entails an evaluation for the whole management schema.
When it comes to correcting employees, are you a lumberjack or are you a gardener? A lumberjack is someone with an axe and makes broad, sweeping strokes to chop down trees. A gardener, on the other hand, does make cuts, but does it with an attitude of pruning, of molding, of shaping, of helping things grow. Now, recently I was talking with a client who was behaving like a lumberjack, and he gave me permission to share this story. We were talking on the phone in a coaching call, and he used phrases that I've never heard him use before. Things like, "I blasted that employee. That was a stupid mistake." And he repeated those phrases over and over. Now, I helped him work through it, and he realized that the way he was behaving in his frustration was not really congruent with his personal values. So instead, I gave him 3 tools. We'll call them gardening tools. The first one is never respond to a first instance. We all make mistakes, and sometimes they're really dumb mistakes. And most of the time, we recognize when we made a mistake. It's the same thing with your employees. By backing up and giving them a little bit of space with permission to make mistakes and correct themselves, you'll empower them. Now, obviously, if it's some horrible mistake, something that's damaging the company, obviously you want to jump in on the first instance. But for most of the mistakes that people make, you can back up and give them a little bit of room. Now, the second tool is correct quickly with clarity, CQC, correct quickly with clarity. What that means is that rather than what some people do, which is let things fester inside for days or weeks or months and then just explode, you correct quickly. And when you see something that's out of place, obviously the second time, you jump right in and correct. But you do it with clarity. And what that means is that you use precise language. You talk about the actions and the result, what actions they did and what result it got, what different actions you want them to do, and what different result you want. By using precise, clear language, you depersonalize it and make it not feel like a personal attack. And then the third gardening tool is to then, after you've corrected them, be supportive and caring. By showing them and telling them about how important they are to you and to the company, you help them realize that you're not their enemy. You're their friend. You're the gardener. You're there to help them grow and improve, not just for the company, but for their own career. And then you become more of a mentor rather than the bad guy kicking their rear. So, in summary, avoid responding to the first instance, correct quickly with clarity, and then be supportive and caring. I look forward to hearing your stories or experiences, maybe about being a lumberjack or a gardener, and also your perspective on correcting employees. So please comment on this page, and I look forward to talking with you.
Next, elements of a discipline program. An effective, comprehensive, and successful discipline program should contain some of the following elements written in COFMACO Employees Handbook. First, Code of Conduct. A handbook that is provided to every employee explaining what is expected and unacceptable behavior.
Here, employee handbooks are one of the most important tools in protecting your company. Why? Well, let's consider the following question. Is there an agreement, a contract, if you will, between you and your employee? The answer is clearly yes. And without an employee handbook, many courts have interpreted that agreement as a verbal contract between you, the employer, and your employee. These verbal agreements often go badly for most employers. So if your company does not have a handbook, it probably should. If your company does have a handbook, has it been updated annually? With laws changing every year, it is a necessity to have your employee handbook updated in order to be compliant and reduce your employment exposure. BizAssure can review and grade your current handbook in respect to both federal and state compliance. The average turnaround time to receive your handbook review is about 10 business days. The average retail cost of a handbook review outside of BizAssure is about $450 or so. But the BizAssure offer is free to any employer working with one of our member insurance agents. This report comes with recommendations as to the most efficient ways to ensure compliance for your company. BizAssure can keep your new handbook evergreen from that point forward through our standard BizAssure consulting. Hey, that's a pretty good deal. Contact your local BizAssure member agency or a BizAssure account executive today. BizAssure, sophisticated business solutions done simply.
Second, knowledge of disciplinary punishments. Employees should know what penalties would occur with certain offenses. Next, appeal procedure. Employees should have the opportunity to voice their side of the story. Then, reservation of right. Include a statement that says you have the right to modify the policy. And last, fair discipline. Discipline must be applied consistently to all employees in an unbiased way. When setting up your discipline program, it should contain the following steps in the disciplinary process.